The dismantling of the Mets core continues as it is another Met outbound in a trade. And could the Mets be making a trade for a superstar? All of it, the focus of today's edition of the Bleav in Mets podcast. Jack McKessie, Chris Schubert, back with you once again to talk all things New York Mets. Jack, the free agency series once again put on pause. We're not allowed to do regularly scheduled programming because David Stearns doesn't care for anybody's feelings, does not care about your favorite Mets, the longest tenured Met, does not care, as they traded Jeff McNeil. We'll get into that, what it means, why the Mets did this, what their moves could be moving forward. And we'll talk about the latest rumor, the biggest rumor surrounding the New York Mets right now as well. How are you, my friend?
I am good, Chris. I am reflecting now when you made that comment about David Stearns not caring about anything. We are now 2 for 2 on the last two national holidays of the Mets trading one of their players days before. So Brandon Nimmo traded the Sunday before Thanksgiving to the Texas Rangers for Marcus Semien, and Jeff McNeil now being traded to the no-name city Athletics 3 days before Christmas. So it's been a very interesting offseason, but I can't say it's totally unexpected.
Yeah, the Mets trade Jeff McNeil to the Athletics in exchange for a 17-year-old high A-ball prospect. And the important part of this trade is the Mets freed up a roster spot, and they freed themselves of $10 million of salary, as they are paying $5.75 million of the $15.75 million that was owed to Jeff McNeil. They will also be on the hook for the $2 million buyout if the A's choose to not accept the player option that is on Jeff McNeil's deal. If they do accept it, then they're on the hook for the rest of that money. At least that's what it appears. And so, Jack, yet again, here we are in the Mets offseason where a long-tenured core member of the New York Mets gets traded, and it feels like we have to have this conversation again of why the Mets did this. Did this make sense? Do they care about their fans? Now, this is to a lesser extent, I think, than Pete and Edwin and Brandon, but after those three guys got moved, Jeff McNeil was the longest tenured Met. Now that honor is bestowed upon David Peterson, and let me let you in on a little secret, everybody. David Peterson is not going to be long for this Mets team. He might be on the team in 2026, but beyond that, I'm not sure if David Peterson is long for this roster, because David Stearns is making it very clear to all of us. This team's now going to have his stamp of approval in every spot. And so David Peterson, not drafted, not signed, not acquired by David Stearns, probably going to be gone. You are going to see players in positions for the New York Mets next year that David Stearns solely had a hand in acquiring outside of probably Francisco Lindor. That's it. That's the only exception to this rule. And so, yeah, it's yet another day where we get to have this conversation. Now, I think this conversation's easier to have than the other ones. I don't know if you share that sentiment, Jack, but I will tell you this one's more logical to get my head around. I have plenty of reasons why this makes sense for the New York Mets, and I'll lay them out here in a second. But just your overall thoughts on the Mets freeing up $10 million in salary, freeing up a roster spot, and yes, moving on from another piece of the core of the last couple of years.
It makes sense from a lot of different points. I think the roster spot one is the first one that I thought of being the thing that made the most sense, because we've talked about it multiple times here on Bleav in Mets, how the Mets have a glut of second basemen, or at least players who can play second base. Jeff McNeil, obviously that was his primary position. I think the Brandon Nimmo trade to bring in Marcus Semien from the Texas Rangers kind of started to spell the end of the time of Jeff McNeil's time with the Mets, because obviously Semien's a second baseman. McNeil, has the versatility to play in a corner outfield spot, but and that kind of led me into the next thought of, we have all these second basemen. We have Jeff McNeil as being one of them. Luis Angel Acuna, Brett Beatty's played second base, although he's probably the starting third baseman. Jorge Polanco, a second baseman, or a guy who can play second base. Ronnie Mauricio, a guy who's still looking for a spot on the roster. And then I thought about the core that the Mets had, and the way that David Stearns has kind of methodically blown up the previous core that, like you said, he had no mention or no hand in building. And it's just weird to think now about David Peterson being the longest tenured Met, but it makes sense from the perspectives of, for Jeff McNeil, took up a roster spot that the Mets had too many players that could have fit in that spot instead. And David Stearns clearly wanted to do something new with this core and build something different and McNeil was not going to be a part of those future plans.
The New York Mets won 83 games last year and missed the playoffs. Everybody wants the New York Mets to start acting both in their actions in free agency at the trade deadline and how they put together their roster, but also in the results of the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? I mean, we'll just use Steve Cohen's words. He wants to be Dodgers East, and everybody likes to throw those words in his face when he lets Edwin Diaz go to the Dodgers, when he lets Pete Alonso walk to go to Baltimore. It's like, if you're the Dodgers of the East Coast, money should not be an issue. You should bring those guys back, no problem. Guess what? One of the underlying things you have to be able to do if you want to be the Dodgers of the East Coast is you have to be shrewd. You have to be able to cut emotion out of it and make what is the right baseball decision. The New York Mets won 83 games and missed the playoffs. It requires some painful decisions. It requires Pete Alonso gone. It requires Brendan Nimmo traded. It requires Edwin Diaz not to be brought back. It requires Jeff McNeil to be traded. You have to set a standard. And while this may be painful, and while some fan favorites and some players that I really enjoyed, I mean, listen, it's a batting champion. I mean, it's not that long ago Jeff McNeil was the best hitter in the National League. So this is a painful day, but these days are required for you to build what you were trying to build from when Steve Cohen got here. And unfortunately, because David Stearns was not available, was still under contract with Milwaukee, he tried to piecemeal it together for those first couple of years and throw money at the problem. And now David Stearns has come in, and they kind of have to undo a little bit of that. They have to wind it back a little bit to then build it the right way. And I think you are starting to see an 83-win season be the sort of stimulus to that idea, to allow David Stearns to do that. So that's reason number one why this trade makes a ton of sense. The other reason why you're not going to pay somebody $15.75 million when you traded for his replacement a couple weeks ago. Like, Marcus Semien was brought in here because we need to be better defensively. Speaking of defense, the other reason why you're not going to keep Jeff McNeil around is he's a net negative in left field as a defender, and we know defense is a main centerpiece of what this team is doing this offseason with how they're reconstructing this roster. So they're going to want defense to be a priority out there in left field. So he can't play second base because we've traded for a defensive replacement there. He doesn't really fit the mantra of this team out in left field. Are you paying him $15.75 million to be a utility player off the bench? We saw with a lesser version of this in Starling Marte, an overpaid, basically utility player who could play a couple different positions. It locks you in throughout the course of the year, being able to, when you need a spark or when a guy's playing well down in the minor leagues, to be able to call that player up. So Jeff McNeil's presence on this roster, with the way it was constructed today, that's not even assuming what they're going to do over the next couple of weeks. If it's a Cody Bellinger, if it's a trade for Ketel Marte, if it's a trade for a starting pitcher, who knows what this roster is going to look like in a couple of weeks. But all I know is right now it's not favorable to Jeff McNeil's place on it, and it wasn't going to get any better. So I think the Mets did well here to free up $10 million. What they used that $10 million for, perhaps we got a glimpse into that with a report that came out earlier today. But yeah, I mean, of all of the moves the Mets have made so far, I think this is the one that surprises people the least, especially when Semien was traded for. It felt like, okay, Jeff McNeil now doesn't really have a spot on this roster. And also, you have a guy coming off of thoracic outlet syndrome, surgery. What does that look like defensively? What does that look like for him being able to swing a bat? Like, how long does it take for him? You're going to pay a guy $15.75 million and he's not available for the first couple weeks of the season, the first couple months of the season. So his availability was in question. So Jeff McNeil just wasn't a player that fit the 2026 New York Mets in so many different ways. And so being able to pay part of it, this is where Steve Cohen's money plays a role, using some of his money to, say, free up a roster spot, to free up some money to be able to maybe go sign a reliever, or use that money to, offset giving Cody Bellinger a big contract over the next couple of years. All of it just made way too much sense here, and this one doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
I would agree. It's just of the moves that have happened so far, it just makes the most sense. I think if I had to go through and rank them, the Edwin Diaz non-signing, I think, would hurt the most, just because it felt like he was a guy that could really improve the 2026 Mets. And I had said, right before it happened, that I liked the Devin Williams move to be added to the back end of the bullpen. I would have really liked it if Diaz stayed. So that's going to be the one that I think I expected the least and also hurt the most. Number 2 is probably Nimmo, just because of the longest tenured thing that he had as a guy that had been around since 2016, a guy that filled the left field spot, and also in terms of unexpectedness, also up there in, like, he was a guy who had recently been extended for, 5 more years that I wasn't sure that he was going to play the whole thing, but I figured he'd stick around for a little bit longer, and he didn't have a bad year in 2025 by any means. And then I would go Pete Alonso as the third, pretty expected with the short-term contract they gave him last year that they weren't going to go long. It sucks to lose the home run king of the franchise, but at the end of the day, like, didn't fit defensively. Like you said, what David Stern's plan was for the roster. But the Mets didn't win enough while he was around. We've talked about how we don't really think Pete Alonso can be your number 2 best offensive option on a team, and the Mets needed to kind of diversify their lineup. So he's number 3, and then Jeff McNeil, I think, is number 4 in terms of expectation and disappointment. I think I fully expected him to be off this roster by the time his extension was up, and with the Marcus Semien trade, with all the players that they have that can play his position, with kind of the offensive regression we've seen a little bit since that batting title, since the implementation of a shift ban, it's not really surprising at all to me that McNeil was not going to be a part of this team for much longer.
Yeah, I would agree with that order. I think the only one that actually hurt me was Edwin, only because of who you lost out to, the offer that you made. It just symbolized where the Mets are at right now in their life cycle. Like, players aren't going to pick the New York Mets right now if the Dodgers are also offering. Most players aren't going to pick other teams over the Los Angeles Dodgers. So that was sort of, I think, a culture shock to, man, this team is way behind the contemporaries that they would like to have in this sport. Whereas the other three, I mean, I've been on record with saying that Pete was never going to come back. Nimmo made sense. I even said it well before it was even a thought in everybody's mind to say, like, hey, could they move Brandon Nimmo this offseason? And then with Jeff, like, once you trade Semien, the writing's kind of on the wall of where does he fit into this team, especially when we know defense is a priority. Now, I do not like doing this only because it's unfair to judge a offseason until we see it all the way through. But the current Mets lineup on Fangraphs.com is troubling. It's concerning. There need to be some additions here, and I just want to read it out to everybody what they have the projected lineup to be. Now, they have Marcus Semien batting way higher up in the order than I ultimately think he will, but just keep that in mind as I read this. They have Lindor, Semien, Soto, Polanco, Vientos playing first base, and they have Polanco at DH. Beatty, Alvarez, Carson Benjamin left, Tyrone Taylor in center. So, looking at this, I think DH is still in play if Polanco is truly going to play first base. I think both left and center field are in play because I do not, as much as I'm rooting for it, I don't expect Carson Bench to make the opening day roster. Like, I don't expect it. And we know this team needs more offense. They just got rid of Pete Alonso. They just got rid of Brendan Nimmo. They just got rid of Jeff McNeil. So right now, their only offensive infusion is Jorge Polanco because Marcus Semien had like a 700 OPS last year. So I don't even think it was that. I think it was like a 680 OPS. So they need offense. And there's like 3 spots in this lineup that I see where they need offense. So there is still work to be done. But I think in order for David Stearns to work his magic and not lose his leverage in these trades, like if he signs Cody Bellinger, he has no leverage to free up $10 million in a Jeff McNeil trade. He kind of has to do it in this way to maximize the amount of leverage. So I guess for you, Jack, what do you think is next for this team? And I want to talk about Ketel Marte to wrap, but just what you think is next.
Man, I think it's so hard because there are so many spots that I still think need help. Like you mentioned, obviously offensively, first base, if Jorge Polanco is not going to play first if they have him as a DH, I still think the Mets could really use a first base addition. I think they could also really use an outfield addition in left field because of the loss of Brandon Nimmo. And the guy that I keep coming back to is Cody Bellinger because he's a guy that can fit both of those positions. He's a guy that has been the model of consistency over the past few years. A guy that, even though he's a lefty, had a 10-16 OPS against left-handed pitching last year, albeit in a bit of a smaller sample size because the Yankees platooned him a little bit. But Cody Bellinger just fits so well into the offensive side of things the Mets need. But I also am so intrigued at what they want to do with their starting pitching situation because I think that is still such a big question mark for the Mets right now is what the rotation is going to look like in 2026. They have, in terms of numbers, the number of starting pitchers that they can roll out there for opening day, but there is a clear spot for an upgrade in the rotation, and I just wonder what they're going to do there. If I had to guess, I think the rotation is probably the bigger priority because the hitting market has moved relatively slowly outside of Schwarber and Alonso during the winter meetings. I think after that, though, like if they can make a move for Cody Bellinger or another guy we talked about, Kyle Tucker, even if they want to go the length and the value that he'll be worth to play left field, I think that would be great. But Cody Bellinger is like the number one target in my mind right now, just because I don't know who they look at in the starting pitching market.
And we haven't recorded since they did this, but they did add Luke Weaver to the bullpen. So the bullpen kind
Yes,
of,
yep.
lessens the concern a little bit. And it's funny because I tweeted this after our episode dropped, but the last episode we did where we talked about Tatsuya Amai and how much we love him and how he would be a perfect fit for the New York Mets. You and I think, did like a second episode just off air for 45 minutes where we were just chatting about Mets baseball. And I said to you, man, they're just going to add Luke Weaver to this bullpen. Like it was just an offhand comment in the course of our conversation. And then the next day they added Luke Weaver.
You did say that.
And the back end of the bullpen now is Raley, Minter, Weaver, Williams. I think it could use one more solid arm because the back end right now is Adalbert Azalea, it's Huascar Brazoban, it's Richard Lovelady, it's Cooper Criswell. Like I just need one more name to make me feel comfortable because that group, as much as we love Huascar Brazoban on this program, I could use an upgrade in that tier of reliever with the group that they have. So, but I think it's David Stearns. He's going to find an arm that nobody's ever heard of, is going to be great in spring training and then be awesome in the regular season. So I'm not as concerned after adding Weaver, who, by the way, was great before getting hurt last year. He hurt his hamstring. I think it was either his hamstring or his groin, and he came back way too soon, but he was lights out. And so you've got two guys in Devin and Luke Weaver who have been in New York. If you want to agree to disagree on whether Devin Williams handled New York well, Luke Weaver certainly did. So you have people who have been under those bright lights. So that's good. So I don't worry about the bullpen. Yes, I think the rotation is definitely a place for priority. And I think what is a good thing for the Mets right now is the hitting market is moving so slowly to where they can be patient. And now I start to see a world where they could be opportunistic and like get one of these guys on a 3 or 4 year super high AAV deal, which is where they want to be. And they might be able to, I don't want to say snag both Bellinger and Tucker because I think that's redundant. I don't think that works. But sign one of those two and then get somebody else that maybe we weren't anticipating and be able to get two bats for this lineup. And I think part of the moves that Stearns is making right now, at least I think, is he's trying to keep his options open, especially with the market being so fluid right now. And I guess we can use this into transitioning into what is, I think, arguably the bigger story coming out of the Jeff McNeil news, is there is a reporter who, after the McNeil trade happened, said, hey, yeah, the Mets are exploring a trade for Ketel Marte. And everyone's like, excuse me? The Mets are doing what now? Because for all of the reasons we just said, it made sense to trade Jeff McNeil. I can't have that much logic for Ketel Marte. Now, Ketel Marte is on one of the best contracts in baseball. Ketel Marte is one of the best players at his position in baseball at second base. The problem, though, you traded for Marcus Semien. Ketel Marte has played some center field. I don't know how great he is defensively at this stage of his career. So you're asking him to maybe play left. You're asking him to maybe DH. It's not that clean of a fit. But Francis Romero, who covers baseball for, I think it's Baseball America, or he's a baseball reporter, and he's broken a bunch of stuff in the past. He's the one who originally tweeted it. With Jeff McNeil gone, the Mets are believed to be exploring Ketel Marte, or at least discussing him in trade talks per an industry source. I don't listen. I don't know how this fits. I just outlined why I don't know it. I don't know how it fits. I'm in. Get Ketel Marte on the New York Mets.
I fully agree. I think Ketel Marte, is he underrated, Chris? Like you're living in Arizona,
yes.
So like you have a lot more expertise in the Ketel Marte experience, I would say, but like he is a phenomenal second baseman. And before the Marcus Semien trade, I think if you had asked either one of us which second baseman around the league should the Mets be targeting in a trade, like Ketel Marte was much higher on that list than Marcus Semien would have been.
Do you know how in the American League, everybody loves to talk about Jose Ramirez being the most underrated player in baseball? And because we do it every single year, he's now no longer the most underrated player in baseball.
Yeah.
That's Ketel Marte. Like, I think Ketel Marte falls into that bucket of nobody knows about him. Now, I will say, he did have a little bit of an issue during this season where he missed some time during the run for the Diamondbacks late in the season, and it bothered some teammates. There was some behind closed door stuff where it got leaked to the media that there was some frustration with the way it was being handled by Torey Lovullo, the manager, and so he had to come out and apologize, and it was a bad look. And so you have to worry about what that's going to be like in New York with the media that's going to be much more persistent, that's going to be much more louder about these things, because he's not somebody that's going to play 162. Now, the Mets have been, I think, extremely lucky in this regard that they've had a ton of players who strive for that. Lindor strives for that. Soto strives for that. Pete strives for that. Brandon strives for that. McNeil strives for that. You got guys who want to play 162. Ketel's not that guy. So you have to be okay with him playing, 140, 150, and that probably being the max. But this is the best second baseman, I think, in the sport. And maybe he's not going to play second base every single day if you trade for him, but he is going to be your DH, and he's going to put up MVP numbers. Now, I came up with a hypothetical. And you don't know that I have this. So I want your instant gut reaction to this trade. Would you do this trade? Jonah Tong, Luis Angel Acuna, Ryan Clifford.
Yeah, I would. But losing Tong is rough, especially with the starting pitching issues the Mets have. I would obviously love to see what they do to rehabilitate that issue. And then losing Ryan Clifford would be also tough because he is among the top Mets prospects that also play first base, and that is going to be an issue in the coming years.
I hear you. The Diamondbacks, and you just mentioned this, that this is my backyard, so I know this very well. The two things that they need is big league pitching, because Corbin Burns is out and they're going to lose Zach Gallen in free agency. They did bring Merrill Kelly back, but they need some more high-end arms, or at least some high-ceiling arms for that rotation, and they want cost controlled, and Jonathan, has tons of years of control.
Sounds
they
similar
also
to
need
the Padres
yes,
situation where
5,000%.
they have similar needs that the Mets could fit as far as a trade partner.
Acuna gives them a defensive-minded guy. Mike Hazen, their general manager, loves defense. He can play second base with that spot being open with Ketel gone. And the reason for Clifford is their first base situation is a mess right now. They've got a prospect that they traded for with Seattle who's been okay. They have Pavin Smith, a left-handed bat who they've given tons of opportunity to, but he hasn't really been able to thrive. So Clifford gives them a left-handed bat to infuse into their lineup. And they're going to want players that are closer to big league ready than lottery tickets. So you're going to have to be... Now, to me, they're going to ask for McLean because it's Ketel Marte, and he's on one of the most team-friendly deals. And David Stearns will politely say no, thank you. But I do think Sprout and or Tong are going to have to be in the deal for this to work, because they're going to want somebody that can be in the rotation next year. And so I don't know. That deal would be okay with me, because I just love Ketel, and I think he's one of the best players in the sport. And I think a top half of the lineup that is Lindor, Marte, Soto, Polanco, and trying to think who would hit fifth in that lineup. Like, that's really good. Like, that's a really solid top end of the lineup where you're going to be able to produce more offense than you did last year, and that's a price I'm willing to pay. I don't touch McLean. I don't touch Jet Williams. I don't touch Carson Bench. Like, I keep the core nucleus of prospects that I want to keep around, but I get a superstar in Ketel Marte. So, listen, it's a clunky fit, so I don't know how realistic this is, but I'm all in. When I saw the report, you sent it to me, and you were like, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Let's go!" Like, I'm all in.
That's the thing that I keep coming back to, is I just don't know what, because of the Marcus Semien trade, it just feels so redundant. And also with Jeff McNeil being traded, it felt like the idea was, okay, we need to get another second baseman off our roster to maybe give more chances to the younger guys, whether that's Luis Angel Acuna or Ronnie Mauricio, to get some at-bats here and there. Where is Ketel Marte going to play? If Jorge Polanco's the first baseman / DH, and Marcus Semien's your second baseman, and Brett Beatty's playing third, and Francisco Lindor's playing shortstop, like you mentioned the outfield thing, but that doesn't give you a bonus defensively for a David Stearns-built team that is trying to prioritize building up the defense a lot more. It obviously helps the offense a ton, but I just don't know what the Mets' philosophy is if they were to bring in Ketel Marte.
I will say this. He was not a very good center fielder when he was out there. And one of the reasons why they moved him out of center field, he played it in 2019 a lot, and he played it in 2021 a lot. And the two things that the Diamondbacks really tried to guard against was his legs, like him losing his legs and then him needing to take like a week or two off because he's just worn down. So I think that's a concern. Now, if you stick him in left, that's certainly better than center at Citi Field, right? But he's never played left before. Yeah. He's only played center. And so this would be very, okay, we just said this isn't a David Stearns move. This would be very Jorge Polanco. This would be like, we're going to make him a left fielder when he's never done it. Like, we're going to make Jorge Polanco a first baseman when he's never done it.
That's true.
And I guess, and if you have Tyrone Taylor in center, or Carson Bench in center, who are two very good defenders, you can maybe make up for, because what you can't do is have Ketel in center and Soto in right field. Everything that gets hit into the gap's a triple. Like, that's not going to work out for you.
Right. The other thing I was also thinking to that end is, like, Semien is a huge upgrade to the right side of the infield and the right side of the field in general, just because Soto is obviously a negative defensively in right field. I guess the Mets are hoping Polanco is a positive over what they had last year in Pete Alonso at first base on the right side. The Mets are pretty set defensively on the left side with Brett Beatty and Lindor in the infield, at least, which kind of mitigates the impact that your left fielder needs to have as a defender, especially when, like you mentioned, they have Tyrone Taylor as a defense first center fielder. So I just don't love the idea of like both your corner outfielders are severe weak points defensively.
Or you're just going to make him the DH. Like he can just be a DH. Like that is a distinct possibility where if Jorge Polanco really truly is going to be the first baseman. Like if that is actually what the Mets are doing, and I'm still not a believer. Like I'll say this, until Ryan O'Hearn signs elsewhere, I would want Ryan O'Hearn to play first base. Like I'm all in on O'Hearn being the first baseman for the Mets next year. So until that happens, I still think this is all a PR move to sign a first baseman or get a first baseman. But if that really truly is what they're trying to do, they have the DH spot open. It's not like Mark Vientos played so well to the point last year where it's his job. Like he lost that opportunity. And so if you can make an upgrade, you make an upgrade. So it's awkward. It's not a clean fit, but if they were willing truly to give somebody the DH spot every single day and that player is not going to be Jorge Polanco, you take the defense question off the table for Ketel Marte if you just make him the DH.
Yeah, and he is a really good hitter, Chris. Like a very
awesome.
Good hitter.
Yeah, I mean, let me pull up his StatCast page just to give you the numbers from last year because he's been great the last couple of years. He was an MVP candidate in 23 for them when they almost won the World Series, when they went to the World Series. He was awesome. He's just going to do everything. He's going to hit for power.
He got down ballot MVP votes this year as well, apparently.
He's going to get on base. He's going to draw walks. I mean, let me give you the StatCast metrics here. This was last year. 83rd percentile barrel rate, 85th percentile bat speed. K rate was 85th percentile. His walk rate was 84th percentile. His expected numbers, his expected weighted on base average was 97th percentile. Expected batting average 96th percentile. Expected slugging 94th percentile. Last year he hit 283 with a 376 on base and an 893 OPS, and he hit 28 home runs. That was a down year for him. An 893 OPS was a down year because the year prior he hit 292 with a 372 on base, a 932 OPS, and he hit 36 home runs. So I mean, this is just a middle-of-the-order bat. You can hit him 2, you can hit him 3. Like, this is a guy that's going to just absolutely mash the baseball, and he would make the New York Mets a better baseball team, especially on the offensive side. Where he fits defensively, your guess is as good as mine to what the Mets would do. But listen, you need to improve your offense. This would be something to do. And, oh, by the way, he's on a deal where he makes $15 million this year, and I thought about this driving home. They just freed up $10 million for Jeff McNeil, so you're basically only adding $5 million in salary for Ketel Marte. That's like the best bargain in the sport. Now I know it doesn't actually work that way, but
boy, math.
That's
math.
Mets math. That's how I'm choosing to view it in my head. That he's really a $5 million player for this year, and I would trade Jonathan, Luis Angel Acuna, and Ryan Clifford for a $5 million version of Ketel Marte. Like, yeah, I'm in. So
yeah.
More moves to come for the New York Mets. I mean, that's the one thing we know for sure with the tearing down that they are doing. There is a lot of stuff that's going to happen to this roster between now and then. We will be here to break it all down for you on the Bleav in Mets pod. The next time you hear from us, it'll be after Christmas. We'll get to the Cody Bellinger episode. Maybe the Mets will do something. It's kind of the theme here. We have episodes planned, and then the Mets decide to do something, and that breaks it all up for us. So the tentative schedule is the Cody Bellinger breakdown, but you'll hear from us after Christmas, and we'll talk about either Cody Bellinger or what the Mets do between now and then. If you're new, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, share an episode with a friend or a fellow Mets fan. We would greatly appreciate that. You want to watch the show over on YouTube, Jack McKessy, McKessy is where you can watch the video, and shout out to the YouTube audience. We got a lot of new faces over there that are hanging out with us, so greatly appreciate that. Everybody have a happy holiday, stay safe, and we will talk to you guys in the next one. And as always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.